What is up? Today, to celebrate the end of the What is up, guys? Today, to celebrate the end of 2025, I'm going to be ranking the top three best and worst pay per views of the year, in my opinion. And let's just get into it. So, starting off with my third favorite pay per view of 2025, I'm putting UFC 323. This whole fight card, but especially the main event, was amazing. Purion coming back after that timeline altering knee to Aljo in 2021, stringing together three fights in a row before getting to Marab again, and completely destroying Marab despite getting 50-45 in that first fight, just showed a testament to not only his will, but the fact that he is so good. He came into this fight with the perfect game plan to not get steamrolled by Marab. Every time Marab would kind of take him down, he wouldn't really try to fight the takedown as hard as, someone like Umar. He would just kind of accept getting taken down, but then Turtle, because Marab doesn't really have too much of a back take or submission threat from that position, he would just be able to turtle, fight the hands, and then get back up, as MMA Che would like to say. Um, he came in with the perfect game plan. Offensively, he's the superior striker in this fight. And he wasn't really able to show that in the first fight in 2023. Mainly, I do believe because of his injury, he wasn't really throwing his right hand at all in the first fight. And although most fighters come into fights injured, they're never really 100%. I do think that this particular instance impacted Jan actually a lot more than we thought initially. Jan came in this fight a completely different fighter from the first, not tentative at all or gun shy, guns a-blazing, coming in, slamming body kicks into Marab's liver, hurting him multiple times with that, popping Marab's face off with that jab, his head just continuously snapping back because Jan was just automatic with that jab, finding the mark every time he threw, blooding Marab's face up, hitting good body shots, and even mixing in takedowns of his own, showing that his not only was he just the much more elite striker in this fight and efficient striker, but he was also the all around just more well rounded fighter with the skill set to be able to contend with Marab on the ground, even dunking Marab on his head, Leon Edwards Bilal esque. This fight was amazing to watch, and it was honestly, there were some more examples of this, but I really thought that the MMA gods were not nice enough to give us a win like this, to give us a Piotr Jan comeback redemption win over Marab after losing the championship years ago. But it happened, and it was amazing to watch. We had other fights in this card. Obviously, Alexandre Pantoja and Joshua Van didn't go the way we wanted it to. I'm really heartbroken for Alexandre Pantoja. Hopefully, we can run it back, and he can be 100% coming back, but I don't know if that'll be the case. We had Brandon Moreno getting TKO'd by Tatsuro Taira in pretty impressive fashion. A little bit of an early stoppage, but, still a very entertaining fight overall. And then this fight to actually not to start off the pay-per-view because Bogdan Goskov and Jan Blachowicz did that. That was a little bit boring, I'm not going to lie. I wasn't super impressed with either guy. But this fight, Henry Cejudo versus Peyton Talbot, was extremely entertaining. Henry Cejudo's a tough man. He's a tough out. He stood in there even though he got dropped and hurt a good few times by Peyton Talbot on the feet. He's he's an old vet, man. He's gritty. But Talbot is hungry. He's rapidly improving with each fight. 2 fights ago, he had very little wrestling. Now he's able to inside trip and take down Henry Cejudo. Extremely impressive. He even hit some emotes on Henry on the ground. Hit the flight reacts emote. That was really funny. And overall, I'm impressed by Talbot, and I'm glad that he was able to win just because this really shakes up bantamweight. I'm not going to lie, if Merab were to beat Piotr Jan the second time, there really wouldn't be anyone for him at bantamweight. We would be looking at maybe a Pantoja, super fight moving up. But that probably wasn't going to happen either, so we wouldn't really know. Maybe Merab would have to move to featherweight at that point. The division really would have been dead if Merab had beaten Piotr Jan, just because there wouldn't have been any other remotely interesting fight for him. Unless, maybe you could put in Umar one more time against Merab, but I don't think the outcome would have changed in that fight. And overall, now that Jan has won and that Peyton Talbot has shot up in the rankings, I'm glad. This really shakes up bantamweight, gives us a lot of new, fresh contender matchups, and I'm glad. So I'm really excited for the bantamweight division and the upcoming 2026. But that is our third best pay-per-view card of the year. Moving on, UFC 317, amazing card from start to finish. Banger main event, banger fights throughout. We had, let's just start off with the main event. Topuria absolutely destroying Charles Oliveira. I'm not going to say I loved watching this just because Charles is one of my favorite fighters, and I'm sure he's a lot of your favorite fighters as well. Um, but Ilia Topuria, man, there were some questions coming to this fight. I know that he was a favorite coming into the fight, but there were questions around, whether his power would translate. The fact that he's so small, he's not even a big featherweight, how that would work against the big guys at lightweight, and the fact that Charles is so much bigger than him and has basically every physical attribute over Ilya. He has the reach, the length, he has the height to see shots coming in better, but it didn't matter. Ilia Topuria handled the grappling well, stayed composed when Charles was going for some submissions like that leg lock, got himself out of there and flatlined Charles in 2 minutes straight. It was insane. And Ilia Topuria's, I mean, what he's going through now, it's not looking great, but I still think he's got many more years left in the UFC, and he's got many more years to be a champion and to be great. So this fight confirmed that, and I honestly think that Ilia Topuria would beat Islam at 155 and probably even 170. I know that's a bit of a hot take, even after Islam won the welterweight title, but I do think Ilia Topuria is the best fighter currently in the UFC. We also have Pantoja and Kai France. Um, Extremely impressive. I was very impressed by Alexandre Pantoja running through Kai France, just completely bulldozing him. Every time he wouldn't even go for like traditional, double leg or single leg takedowns. He really was just running at Kai France full force and just bulldozing him over and then taking his back and controlling him, landing hard leg kicks and making Kai France extremely tentative on the feet to throw anything. He really wasn't able to get any momentum going in that fight and just looked completely like a deer in headlights out there. And Pantoja just completely mauled him on the ground, destroyed him, and then subbed him in the third. This was an extremely impressive showing by Pantoja, and I'm at this point I was like convinced that, first of all, I thought that Pantoja was the bantamweight GOAT at this point, and I still believe he is. I mean, sorry, flyweight, the flyweight GOAT. But I was thinking after this fight that he would easily get through Joshua Van, and I still believe that he would beat Joshua Van in a rematch, unless he's like truly out of his prime after that arm snap. I believe that if that arm snap never happened, he would have destroyed Joshua Van as well. But speaking of Joshua Van, we had the Van versus Royval fight. Basically, by consensus, the best flyweight fight of all time. It's one of the best fight in the lighter weight classes that I've ever seen in my time as a UFC fan. Um, Joshua Van and Brandon Royval trading shots. Brandon Royval with the slight edge in volume and just general accumulation of shots, but Joshua Van making up for that and landing the harder, cleaner, singular punches, putting together some combinations at the end, but most of the time it was Brandon Royval sneaking in the, groups of shots and Joshua Van pull countering with big shots to the chin, good shots to the body and teeps. Overall, it was a great fight. I was giving Joshua Van the fight even before the knockdown at the end, but that really sealed the deal for him, and that solidified him as the number one contender at flyweight. Extremely exciting for at the time for Joshua Van and for the fans. Then we had Dariush and Moicano. It was a good scrap. The fact that Dariush got dropped by Moicano is a little funny, I'm not going to lie. But his chin is really gone, but he still showed that he has some of the best scrambling ability at lightweight and in the UFC in general, and ended up pulling off the win, getting through it. And then we had Peyton Talbot beating Felipe Lima. Good bounce back win, showed some improvements in his grappling, and yeah, it was a great card overall. But now we move on to our number one best fight of the year, in my opinion, and that is UFC 320, guys. This fight card as a whole was absolutely amazing. I loved it. To see Alex Pereira, after basically fading into irrelevance a little bit, after that first loss to Ankalaev, to then coming back and KOing him in a minute, that was some of the best, like basically the best thing I've seen in the sport so far. If you guys saw MMA Guru's reaction, you would know how I'm feeling. That is exactly how I felt. This fight was just this it was an amazing fight, man. And the fact that Pereira just came out there with no fear, just completely just going for the knockout, balls to the wall, all or nothing. If that moment, like if he had gotten past, and I'm talking about Ankalaev, if he had gotten past like the first, second rounds, he probably could have won a decision again or even knocked out Pereira. But Pereira was just too much too soon. And Pereira looked so much bigger than Magomed Ankalaev in the cage that night. It was amazing to watch. And given how gun shy and like tentative Pereira looked in that first fight, it was just so interesting to see the change. Especially since I really thought most people were writing off Pereira at the time. After Magomed had beaten Pereira in March, no one had even spoken a lick about Pereira. Like besides fight week where Pereira did some like his usual Nina drama shenanigans, stuff like that, like we hadn't heard much from Alex Pereira, and going from the face of the UFC in 2024, knocking out all these guys in main events, to then basically not being relevant at all. It was insane to like. It was kind of crazy. Like there were a good couple months where I just didn't think of Alex Pereira at all as a UFC fan, which is insane. Like he really just went silent and then came back, and I don't know. I was thinking like, dude, he got hurt in the first fight on the feet against Ankalaev. He's slower, he's older. Ankalaev's hungry. First of all, he doesn't like Alex Pereira, and second of all, he's just I just at the time I was thinking that he's the slicker boxer than Alex, as shown in the first fight, and he's elusive enough to avoid big shots from Pereira. Even if Pereira was, throwing more this time, he would be able to stay defensively sound, mix in takedowns. In general, like even if he couldn't get any grappling going, he could just kind of hold Pereira against the fence and smudge him. And that's not what happened at all. I'm so happy that Pereira was able to come back. We got our fairy tale ending, and he destroyed Ankalaev in like a minute flat. There's not even a case for a rematch because of how badly he destroyed Ankalaev. And now we're going down the list to Merab beating Corey Sandhagen in extremely dominant fashion. This really solidified Merab as like you can't even argue that he's not the GOAT. Like he was pretty much the GOAT after beating Umar. I'll be real, but with this fight, he cleared out the entire division pretty much, and at this point, like there is no one left for Merab. Like everyone was writing off Piotr Jan going into that fight, and this was like the one. This was the one test. Like maybe Corey Sandhagen with his well-rounded skill set could do something, and like he did win the first round. So there was a small chance for Corey Sandhagen to win. If he couldn't get past Merab, nobody's getting past Merab. That was the kind of the thought process and the consensus during the time. And Merab destroys Sandhagen, damn near TKOs him in the third round. It was great. And then obviously any card with a Yuri fight's gonna be a pretty good card. Yuri with the comeback of the year in my opinion, being down 2 rounds against Khalil Roundtree. We were all thinking like, dude, is Yuri just gonna lose a decision? Like this is insane. But then comes back, puts it on Khalil in the third. Khalil starts to gas. And I just want to make one thing clear. It's not that Khalil has a bad gas tank. It's just that he was getting pressured so much by Yuri, moving backwards, throwing punches, trying to slip. That's going to fatigue you. And Khalil isn't like some cardio monster. He's going to fatigue with under the pressure of Yuri. And you saw that start to happen at the end of the second round. But, obviously he bagged the second round. But then Yuri just completely took over in the third and found the knockout. I can always trust Yuri to find the knockout, man. And this is why I think that if he were to ever fight like a Carlos Olberg or even a Magomed Ankalaev, I think he would beat both of those guys. Just because of how dangerous he is on the feet and the fact that you can always count on him to find a finish when he's down. And I don't think that anyone else in the division besides Pereira can finish him. We had Yusuf Zalal destroying Emmett in like a minute, just subbing him. That was going to be a boring fight, so I'm glad we got it out of the way pretty quickly. And then I'm going to be so real, I didn't watch the Joe Pyfer fight, but I heard it was pretty impressive. He got a good KO, or I mean, sorry, he hurt Magomedov first and then subbed him. But it was a pretty good outing for Joe Pyfer as well. So those are my top 3 cards of the year. Let me know if you agree or disagree. But now we move on to first of all, I'd also like to shout out UFC 314. Seeing Volkanovski get the belt back against Lopez. That was amazing to watch too. Volk's time is not done. He is goated. That win over Diego Lopez has aged better than ever after Diego Lopez beat the fuck out of Gene Silva. This was amazing to watch. I'm so glad this happened. And this year has just been the year of like wholesome things happening. Alexander Volkanovski getting the belt back was amazing. Alex Pereira getting the belt back was amazing, and Jan getting the belt back was amazing. So the trifecta of title wins that I just mentioned were what make these cards so great. And we also had Paddy Pimblett solidifying himself as a top contender at lightweight. We had I'm just not even gonna talk about Pitbull versus Rodriguez because what the fuck happened in that fight, man? That's just like no one wants to talk about that. We had Gene Silva beating Bryce Mitchell in very impressive fashion with a ninja choke, showing his ground game as well as his striking, and then Krylov getting slept by Reyes. And we were all thinking that Reyes was maybe going to make a comeback. This was a wholesome, good card. We got a lot of the outcomes that most fans wanted, but especially Volk, man. I'm so happy for Volk, my glorious king. He's so back, man. But then moving on to the three worst cards of the year, starting off with UFC 318. Now, I'm not going to be shitting on this card totally because this card wasn't bad. The main event was good, but just overall, like if you look at this card without looking at the outcomes, it's not the best, man. Like Kevin Holland, D-Rod, that's low-key like Apex main event slop that, like, come on, like who wants to like really see that? And the fact that Holland lost to D-Rod is even more embarrassing. It's crazy. It was a good fight, but goddamn, I was so like to see that low level of MMA just made my head hurt. And it was the third to last fight on the pay-per-view. Like that's what makes it so crazy. Like this was like one of the lowest level welterweight fights I've ever seen as an MMA fan. We also had Dan Ige versus Pitbull. Extremely boring. Just like I was on my phone for half that fight. I didn't really pay attention. I'm pretty sure there's a drop somewhere. I don't even know who dropped who. I'll be totally honest. I think maybe it was Ige dropping Pitbull, but then Ige just was inactive and just didn't do enough to win. Classic Ige. Yeah, nothing really happened in this fight. And then Michael Johnson versus Daniel Zellhuber. This was impressive by Michael Johnson. He's kind of speed mogged Daniel Zellhuber. Looked very fast in that fight, even as an old unk. But wasn't anything special. And Zellhuber, like, he kind of just like spammed body kicks that entire fight. Nothing really happened. Then we had Paulo Costa. I'm not gonna lie, I was really proud of Costa for this win. People were picking Roman Kopylov, thinking the younger guy, more hungrier, was gonna get, he was gonna eat up Paulo Costa. But like, Costa's still good, man. Like Costa, I think Costa was severely underrated after his like 2020 to 2022 skid, where like he just had boring fights and like losses and stuff, and like he really just fell off during that time. But Costa's still a pretty elite striker, man. He's good enough to beat a good contender like Kopylov. I think that a fight with him and Adesanya looks pretty interesting, but I think they're targeting Adesanya versus Braulio now. Excuse me. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what's up next for Paulo Costa. But that really was the only like, besides the main event, that was the only good-ish fight. That was intriguing. He hurt Roman Kopylov a few times. It was pretty good. And then the main event, Poirier versus Holloway, not bad at all. It was a good send off for Poirier. I was kind of disappointed because I don't know. It felt kind of like an exhibition fight. I'm not gonna lie. Like Max Holloway I feel like he held back finishing Dustin Poirier in that first round. Like he dropped him pretty cleanly, sat him on his butt in that first round, pretty like quick into the fight, and he didn't really rush the follow up. Like he kind of just let Poirier work and then get back to his feet. Like it seemed like he kind of went easy on him a little bit, and I understand that these guys have history. Poirier introduced Max in the UFC, but I don't know. It just felt a little bit fake and phony to me, and as much as I would have liked Poirier getting a win, I'm glad that Max was able to, you know, establish himself a little bit more at lightweight, and this win was probably better for the future of the division, and yeah, it was a pretty good main event. the fight was entertaining itself. You know, both guys hurt each other, and yeah, I got nothing really to say about this fight. It wasn't the most interesting, but I'm glad Max isn't going 0-3 against another fighter, and showing he's still pretty elite. Sorry, guys, my throat's just pretty messed up. But now we go into UFC 319, the second worst title, or the second worst card of this year. I completely just hated this card. I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna be real. I didn't watch this card until the Jeff Neal fight, and that was good. I'm not gonna lie. The spinning elbow knockouts of Carlos Prates and Lerone Murphy were both really good, and they were entertaining. But dude, the main event killed everything. That thing took my soul, bro. I was so excited to see a scrap how Dricus du Plessis would do against Hamzat with the grappling, because Dricus du Plessis has pretty good offensive grappling. We saw him take down Sean Strickland multiple times in both their fights. You know, Dricus du Plessis can utilize his own skills on the ground. He's always been pretty solid, and he's a tank, man. So like, I was thinking like, dude, maybe he could be the one to stop the grappling of Chimaev and stop the freight train. But that just wasn't it. I think the fact that he's so big and muscular is actually the whole reason why he lost and couldn't deal with the grappling. It's because he never really learned the fundamentals and techniques of actually getting up from the bottom against a truly elite wrestler and grappler. He always is used to like muscling his way back up, and that just couldn't work against a guy like Hamza, man. And he just ended up getting ragdolled, and it was so sad to watch because Dricus is an extremely entertaining champion, or at least he was. You know, he was great on the mic. He made his opponents cry. I loved him. He was one of my favorite champions, and he was entertaining in the cage. He was sloppy, but that's what made it a good fight. You know, he made it a scrap every time he went in there, and he just got completely shut down by Hamza Chimaev, and that's not something I thought I would see. But that fight killed the hype for that entire card, and it made these two spinning elbow knockouts not even mattered in my mind. So maybe you disagree. I think this is the second worst card of the year. And then we move on to UFC 312, the worst card of the year. Give it up for UFC 312. And honestly, like, I tuned in for this card, but I was asleep for like half of it. Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. A lot of people argue that this fight shouldn't have been made. I actually disagree. I think that this fight, like, I'm not mad at the fact that this fight was made because Sean Strickland, first of all, had a very close fight with Dricus the first time. It was extremely close. Some people can argue that Sean Strickland actually should have won that fight. And also, he did the UFC a favor by stepping up and actually beating Izzy in a decently entertaining fashion. So, like, I kind of get that he got the rematch. And the fact that he was promised the match against Strickland before Hamzat had choked out Whitaker, like, it makes sense that he wasn't leapfrogged. I'm actually, like, I'm not super mad at the fact that this fight was made and the fact that it went down because it wasn't even super boring. It was just Dricus du Plessis outstriking Sean Strickland. Like, it wasn't super entertaining, but it wasn't super boring, and it just showed that Dricus du Plessis is like levels above these other guys in the division. But the rest of the card was just bad, man. Like, Weili Zhang, Tatiana Suarez, pretty boring fight. Justin Tafa, Talson Teixeira, like, how is that the third fight on the card, like, up the card? Like, it's just like, come on, bro. This is Apex slop, dude. And like Jake Matthews, Francisco Prado on like the main event or the main card of a pay-per-view. It just, I don't know, man. That's just like poor matchmaking, dude. But they just put all the slop in Sydney for this card, and it was just, there was no intrigue in any of the fights besides the main event, and that wasn't even that interesting. So overall, this is definitely the worst card of the year. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you probably tomorrow or in the next couple days.